outstretched hand,
back for the fourth in the series of What is School Belonging? And I was very excited to talk to Nan Warshaw, who's a Chicago-based music entrepreneur, activist, and co-founder of the independent label Bloodshot Records. Nan is a graduate of Evergreen State College and Columbia College in Chicago. She's here today because she is the co-founder and president of Refugee Community Connection. I was really curious about the connection for her about punk music, the music scene, the DIY scene, and community-based work and activism. With the Refugee Community Connection, RCC, Nan leads grassroots efforts to help newly arrived families transition to Chicago. Her work directly helps families source everyday necessities, navigate local school enrollment for their children, and build a compassionate neighborhood support network so newcomers feel truly welcome. I learned a lot from Nan, and I think you will too, especially what it means to feel connected in a strong sense of trust and belonging inside of communities.
It's good to meet you in person after all the Facebook messaging.
Yes, and thanks for all your help.
When I first joined that group, I was like, I know this name. I was a music fan, but I kind of was aware and alert of everything that was going on. Your name was definitely in the mix. In my mind, I go back to, subcultures and belonging. And I think there are a lot of answers in wherever people can find their communities. In other words, schools could learn a lot from other subcultures that exist on how to bring people in.
So I grew up in Evanston in the late 60s and early 70s and went through all these really progressive programs that worked well for me. And then I got to ETHS and it was traditional, structured, and I hated it. And I tried to get into more interesting programs there, like they had senior seminar and stuff like that. And I tried to get into senior seminar in my junior year because I had a bunch of extra credits from summer school and they wouldn't let me do it. So I was like, I just got to find something that I like. I wanted to find something better, or I didn't want to be in school. And my mom convinced me, she's like, find a school you want to go to. So I did, and I ended up at Metro, which is a Chicago public school. It was a small alternative Chicago public school without walls, and it was downtown. And so I went there and graduated from there.
So did your music roots start there, or were you already into music before you got there?
Was into music, but not any more so than my peers, I guess. And it was, I think I really got more into music like in college. And that's when, I started the beginnings of, noticing punk rock culture and things in high school, but in college is where I really found it, and I was in like 3 different punk rock bands that weren't very good, but I had fun, and then I really learned that my talents lay more in supporting the artists rather than being one of them.
What bands were you in?
What bands? None that you would have heard of. When I was in college, I was in a band called Feed the Cat, and that was the only band of the 3 I was in that did any recording. We recorded like an EP, and we recorded it on campus. And then I was in a band called Nile Obstat, and what was the other one called? Anyway, so, there were some people in the bands I was in that went on to do real bands or more serious bands. One of the bands I was in was with Donna Dresch, and she went on to form Team Dresch.
Oh yeah, I love Team Dresch.
She was in Fifth Column, and there were a few other people I was in bands with who had other bands, but it was all pretty much Pacific Northwest. I went to college out in Olympia in Evergreen State.
So then you came back to Chicago after Evergreen State, or you hung out there for a while?
I came back, and so I was doing all sorts of other things, working in bars, but booking bands too. And when I say working in bars, it was not just bartending and waitressing, but DJing. And I worked at Metro for a while, and I was the office manager there.
So was that part of community organizing or community support or activism? Did you see those as connected?
I mean, I don't know that I saw the connections then between like working in music related things and working in mutual aid. But today I really see the connections, because so much of my role has been connecting people to each other and to services and resources. And then with Refugee Community Connection, it's also connecting people to stuff that they need. But it's that connection that I now see as the between all my roles.
So I think of, there's a way that we talk about belonging. There's a really almost like a daytime talk show way we talk about belonging, like we connect to one another, and it can be some of the toxic positivity. And then there's I really want to know what's going on in your life. You are me and I am you. And I know these are a little bit of slogans too, but really living those out. We all belong to each other. There are enough resources to go around. When my humanity meets your humanity, we can actually get something done here. So as I'm saying these out loud, I do think of that as very punk rock. No matter what you play or how you play it, like that's at the core. But then I guess, what does your actual work look like to stay true to that, to keep it pure, to have it not get tainted, not be exploited? Like, how do you maintain a vision around humanity, I guess?
I mean, it was much harder working within the music industry and not, being tainted by, all the scummy things that are part of the industry. I mean, from how much the industry has ripped off artists and things like that, but also, just the whole issue of fame and the power that brings, and the levels of power differentiation there are between people then at different levels of fame and control, and trying to, keep that at bay. And so it was much harder, to keep those ugly things away working in the music business than it is working in mutual aid. In mutual aid, there's still a power dynamic, but it's not as prevalent. It's not as insidious. No one's it's not about money. I mean, that's the big thing, is that there's no money involved. I mean, I shouldn't say there's no money involved. There's no one making money.
How do you, though, I know just from my own, like, more recent involvement in it, which really, I think it was driven by ICE, but, well, yeah, I guess when newcomers were coming or being sent here from Texas is when I got on the Facebook group. How do you keep extending your arms around? So as new families come, as new families need it, as families who might not have even known about mutual aid, how do you keep, I'm going to keep using the word belonging, but it doesn't have to be belonging. How do you keep the resources as flexible and as open to humanity as possible?
Well, we do have to set limits on our capabilities within our organization. And if we can't help someone, we then try to refer them to someone who can. And so it's trying to keep that perspective that, we're not doing everything. We're supplementing what the professional resettlement agencies do and what the government programs do. We're filling gaps. And we make an effort to be nimble and to try to fill whatever urgent need there is that's within our scope. And so, we limited our scope in some ways. We had to, just to be good at what we're doing and to be able to help well. And so with Refugee Community Connection, we, help people who are in permanent housing in their first apartment, or they've been doubling or tripling up with other families in an apartment, and then they're finally moving into their own place. And then they need housewares and toiletries and furniture. And so then we're helping them get those things. Whereas, a few years ago had to draw the line that we're not able to assist people in temporary housing and in shelters and things like that. And so we left, that was one pivot we had to make that was difficult, because there were all these people, a few years ago that, had been bussed up from Texas and other places and were sleeping in police stations. And so at first we were trying to help them all and the people in apartments, but they had very different needs. And so then we kind of focused our people who were getting in or in their own apartment. And so it's changes like that we've had to adapt to. And other big times when we, made adjustments to our model based on need was after the fall of Afghanistan, when there were hundreds of Afghans quickly arriving in the U.S. and being held on bases and then being released into cities like Chicago. We already had relationships within the Afghan community and pretty developed relationships. And so we were being contacted many times a day to help the newest arrivals. And so it was things like that. And what do they need right now? And often it was connecting them to a resettlement agency. And those, because they did qualify for government benefits and certain other supports. And so let the professionals do what they do, and then we can supplement.
So those resources, like the resettlement houses that you connected families with, even when you were called originally for Afghan families, were those all relationships that you had to work hard at building throughout time? Like, how did you get to a place where you had, you're in this situation, you go here, this place can help you? Was it a lot of trial and error? What did that look like?
Well, RCC started out completely organically and has grown that way. And our connection to all the refugees and asylum seekers and immigrants, whatever you want to call them, those relationships are all word of mouth. And so that's how they find out about us and reach out to us. And when we first started RCC, it was directly assisting people who arrived under special immigrant visas. And those people were primarily from Afghanistan, some from Syria, and maybe another country. And so our initial families that we started helping were Afghan. They were Afghan SIVs. So those were the people who had worked in their home country with our military, often embedded with them as translators, but they were, getting blown up by IEDs along with American soldiers. I mean, they were in the vehicles with American soldiers and taking hits for it, literally. And then once the Taliban took over Afghanistan, they were targets, and they were being threatened with murder and many horrible things. And I mean, it was a really hard time. I started getting calls from Afghans in Chicago saying, my brother or cousin is being targeted by the Taliban. Can you help? And them sending me photos of of a teenage boy who had been beaten and was bloody, saying that he was trying to protect the family home and the Taliban beat him. And isn't so much, I don't want to say RCC as me, but, when I hear that sort of story, I just feel like I have to help. And if those lines are already drawn by our organization, then I can, psychologically move on and help someone else. But as things are evolving, and someone needs help, I just feel obligated. And so, I was, when all these people were trying to escape Afghanistan after the Taliban took control, I was getting many calls a day from panicked people here trying to save their family members' lives there. And, my partner said to me, come on, you can't do anything about people in Afghanistan. They're way too far away. You don't know anyone in the State Department. What are you going to do? And so I just started reaching out to my elected officials and friends of friends and anyone I knew. And within a day, I did have an in at the State Department, and wow. We were submitting lists of names through our elected officials to get people on evacuation lists. And so, and they had to be turned in on spreadsheets in a certain form, and you needed everyone's passport number, their Afghan passport numbers, and their ID and date of birth, and all this data. So we had these giant spreadsheets, and I was, working on that. Like that was a crazy time in 2021 when it was working like 80, 90 hours a week, because I knew that these people's lives depended on it. And so my teenage kid, I wrote them in, and because they're a techie, and so they were helping with the spreadsheets. And every day we were submitting a couple hundred names of people in the State Department for evacuation. And I know a lot of those people got out. And so that was huge. And most of them got here. I mean, not Chicago per se, but a lot of them, because they had family here, and that's how those connections were made.
Mm-hmm. So it was back to your booking tour date. Like, I'm going to call around, I'm going to keep calling until I get the right person at the right time, at the right place.
Yeah, I mean, I'm stubbornly persistent that way. If I'm motivated to find a path, I just keep trying. And I know a lot of people, and that's, when we started RCC, it was like, great, I can use my 5,000 Facebook friends for good. I can hit them up for donations of things for the free stores and furniture, and I did, and it was wonderful. But the best part is that it makes them feel good too, because if people are downsizing or they have a family member pass away and they have to get rid of all this stuff, they feel better if they know it's going somewhere that matters and they're not throwing stuff away. Plus, it's so much more ecological. I feel good about connecting donations of, used items to people in need.
Yeah.
Gently used items, I should add.
It's a really well-oiled machine. Like having been on, I haven't done any transportation, but some of the advocacy work and then some of the donation work, like up to the driveway with the right path to the right house is like 20 miles away, at this time, and we'll take care of your item. We'll get it there and we'll set it up. And, I've met really nice people along the way. So the coordination is impressive. I wanted to ask, I understand there are levels of when you're talking about someone who has to get out, they have to be evacuated. They're just truly, truly physically unsafe in Afghanistan. But the reality of also coming here, especially now, but even 5 years ago, and coming to a place like Chicago, of course, knowing an America that's in Hollywood movies or on Friends, the TV show, and then getting here and seeing how pushed to the margins you can be, how quickly and swiftly, when there is so much wealth or excess, do you get into that as you're advocating? Does that show up in your work?
When talking with the families, there's often a discussion where they say, I thought things would be easier here. It's a rich country. I thought that they'd be helping us get enough food. Mm-hmm. and things like that. And I have to, tell them that there's people like me advocating for that. And we have a lot of great elected officials working towards that, but that there's a lot of politics, and I've had people tell me now, well, it looks like the government just wants to spend money on war and not helping the people here. And I said, it looks that way to me too. Mm-hmm. And so we had those discussions, and then most of the families have some pressure from family members left behind to send money home. And they assumed they could work and send money home, but most of them can barely pay their rent. And a lot of them are sending money home and not paying their rent because they're, if they get enough food, if they're not homeless at the time, they will send money home anyway, or they feel that obligation. And so I do have to tell them, you gotta get yourself stable first. And I can advise, I can't make anyone do anything. I can only suggest that they pay their own rent and make sure they have enough food first before they send money home.
Mm-hmm. I think it can be hard, without naming specifics, like learning from families, the degrees they bring with them, the education that they have had, and then hearing how hard it is to get even entry level work.
That the family we were talking about earlier, who you're helping, the daughter, that mother was a doctor in Afghanistan, and she comes here and, doesn't have any meaningful work, although they all have green cards. The father's doing manual labor type minimum wage jobs, trying to support the family. And I just see that over and over, people coming here with advanced degrees, and then they're doing minimum wage jobs. It would be great if we had tools to help them get certified or approved to do those jobs here, because they could be very useful for our communities. But those programs are barely in place, or there's not enough of them.
Yeah.
It's not like you're coming in knowing the system. You're coming in from a completely different system, not knowing the system.
Right. I have a question about the volunteers sometimes. Again, my work is on schools, and sometimes I have to do a lot of work with teachers around, it's not about us. It's not about our feelings. Yes, we have egos. Yes, our feelings get hurt. Yes, we invest a lot of time and energy into something. And I don't mean to be dismissive. What I mean to say is, as adults, we can go and commiserate with one another and vent to one another, but we're not taking out on the people that we believe we're showing up for, families and kids. And so what I was curious about your work is, do you ever have volunteers that you have to do that sort of training with? Remember why we're here, remember who we're here for. I'm not trying to put anyone down and talk about, saviorism or because I believe the kind of help people are coming to you with is probably good help, community-based help. But I am curious about that ego piece.
Yeah, within RCC, there's about maybe 10 of us volunteering full-time. And then there's probably another 30 or 40 people volunteering half-time, and then hundreds more volunteering more part-time. And so the more full-time volunteers end up providing support to the newer volunteers or the part-time volunteers or the people in a challenging situation, the volunteers who feel they're in a challenging situation. So the people who are newly arrived have all sorts of crazy stress inducing things. It can be PTSD and trauma from things they've gone through before they got here, but it can also be trauma since they arrived. It could be serious physical health issues. I mean, then there's all the financial struggles as well, plus emergencies, fires, or whatever. And so helping the volunteers help the families that they're supporting, and I don't mean supporting financially, I mean supporting with resources and stuff, is often helping those volunteers define boundaries and reminding the volunteers, and that none of us are paid, that we're not professionals, and that there's anything we can do is a bonus. It's the icing on the cake. It's the additional good feeling. It's the welcoming these people and providing emotional support, even if nothing else. And so of these new arrivals, it's every kind of human that is everywhere else. And so some are really difficult. Some are not honest. I mean, plenty are wonderful, generous, emotionally generous people. I have, people shopping in the free store telling me, "Oh, I want to volunteer and help you in the free store." And I say, well, let's wait until you're settled and you don't need RCC for you anymore. Then you can volunteer with RCC and help people in the future. And then, then there's also people who we give them kids' clothes and their kids outgrow the clothes and they give them back to us, assuming they're in good condition. And they feel good about that because they're redonating donated items that someone else can use. And so there's lots of really great, easy families to support. And I say easy because they're appreciative and thankful. But then, there's the people who aren't good at communication. And language barriers aside, there's people who just aren't good at communication. There's Americans who aren't good at communication. And so that makes supporting and helping them more challenging. And so it's working with the volunteers saying, is that their issue? Is that they're not good at communication? Or is it a language issue? Is it a translation problem you're dealing with? And then, suggesting alternatives. Do you want to get a native speaker to translate for you? And trying to brainstorm on solutions to whatever that problem is that volunteer is facing. There's a number of people who are not fully literate and not even fully literate in their name. So that means that if you're using a translation app and someone isn't literate in their own language, they're using voice to text. So it adds like a layer of the game of telephone and room for miscommunication because they can't read the response. They're just hearing it and responding verbally. And then also plenty of these apps, translation apps, aren't as good at colloquialisms with specific dialects and things like that. So it can be challenging with that too.
Yeah. So 2 more questions. One is, if you had your magic wand, what would you do for RCC or for newcomers or asylum seekers? What would you do right now?
I would find a volunteer or a small group of volunteers to directly assist each household in need. I mean, we get so many donations of needed items, which is wonderful. But what we lack is not stuff or money. It's people putting in the time and energy to directly assist a new household. And that's what we need most. And that direct assistance doesn't have to be anything financial, because that person who's a lead volunteer with that family, they can source almost all or all the needed items from other RCC donors. So it's really using your time to connect, and that can be done within RCC, or people can use outside sources to fill those needs. Now, if you have the money, it's sometimes quicker to throw money at a problem if someone needs something, just to buy it and have it delivered to their house, assuming they can safely accept deliveries. You know, a family needs diapers. Okay, someone's going to buy diapers for that family. That's great. But it's the coordination of who's asking for, you know, the family's telling a volunteer what they need, and then that volunteer needs to find someone willing to donate it, and it's making that connection.
Sort of like the case management model, case management leading to the wraparound support. It's like, who's my liaison, and how do they make sure I'm getting the right things at the right time in the right way?
I think that's a good description of it. I mean, case manager sounds more professional than we are. We're all just volunteers. And, you know, we say we're simply neighbors helping new neighbors. And we're, you know, trying to do that as best as we each can. And with the support of all these hundreds of thousands of other volunteers.
My last question is, how does someone get involved?
Well, I will say RCC is self-directed as a mutual aid group. So if people see a need and they want to fill it, they can create a role to do that. And people have done that all, you know, over the years. We have different coordinators for many things. We have a bicycle coordinator. We have an grocery coordinator. We even have had a sewing machine coordinator. Just all these different roles that people can take on. But what I would say is the short answer is join the Facebook group. RCC is run through a Facebook group. And if you're high tech and you want to help us move to other platforms, we welcome that. We don't want to be stuck on Facebook, but we haven't found better options, and we've had people look and we've researched. So, but right now RCC is Facebook based, which certainly has limitations, but it does work very well for our needs in terms of communication between volunteers and all the daily posts of donations being offered and needs being posted and people seeing the need posted and offering to fill that need, or the donation posted and someone say, oh, I have an RCC family who needs that item. So I'd say join the RCC page, and then at the top of the page in the pinned featured posts, there's the descriptions of how to be a lead volunteer and all the other main information that you need just to get going with RCC is in those top pinned featured posts. So join Refugee Community Connection and then read through the basics and you can go from there.
Awesome. Yeah, I found it very easy. I'll put that link in there too, but I'm grateful for your time. I'm listening here thinking about all the punk rock connections and subcultures, and there's a thread to be investigated through all your work, which is pretty cool.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, I see that the thread, but I don't know how many other people do.
An outstretched hand, smiling eyes, comfort humming through the halls, tracing lines I used to hide.